Hello, I'm Kim Butler. Today's money myth is that your average rate of return reflects your actual rate of return. So what are we talking about here? Interest rates, obviously, and interest rates are used to measure the rate at which an investment grows. And it's very, very common for commentary people, the financial institutions, print material, you name it, to talk about average interest rates. We see it in all kinds of areas where somebody will say, well, that's an average interest rate over a period of time of 6% per year, or 8% per year, or 10% per year. The challenge with this is that this average rate of return, which is mathematically correct, has absolutely nothing to do with the actual rate of return that your money is growing. Now, in a fixed environment, this difference between average and actual is less of an issue. So let's say that we have a 6% annuity and it earns 6% for 3 years. Well, then it is an average interest rate of 6 and 6 and 6. And your actual interest rate is 6 and 6 and 6. But if you have a fluctuating interest rate, so any type of mutual fund, the growth of a stock account, any type of environment where the interest rate is different every single year, what people want to do is average those interest rates. And this is where average does not equal actual. In other words, the average of, say, 3 years might be mathematically correct. But when you look at the dollar figure in the first year and the dollar figure in the third year, and you work backwards to figure out what rate of return that money grew, you will not see the same average as the actual rate that the money grew. So you have this situation where people want to use, especially when they're doing financial planning or any type of forward projection, they want to use average interest rates. And it may be a 5-year average or a 10-year average, or my earlier example of a 3-year average, or it might even be longer, like a 20-year average. But the fact that it's mathematically correct has nothing to do with reality, because your actual interest rate is a function of the dollar figure at the beginning and the dollar figure at the end. And that actual interest rate may have absolutely no relation to the mathematically correct average interest rate, and yet we use the average interest rate to make decisions with. And this is an area of typical financial planning that is very, very dangerous, because people want to say, okay, I'm going to put in, say, $10,000 a year, and I'm going to average, say, 8% per year, and that means I'm going to have X dollars in the future, when in actuality, that is not what happens unless you have a fixed account that is guaranteed at 8% every single year, in which case your average would equal your actual. But again, if you're in a fluctuating environment where it earns 10% one year and then negative 6% another year and then maybe 8% the next year, and you add all those up, your average does not equal your actual. Furthermore, if your account is very volatile, for example, let's say you're earning positive 20% and then negative 18% and then positive 10% and then negative 8%, and it's moving around like that, the difference between your average and your actual is going to be even more extreme. So counting on an average is even more dangerous. Now, let me share with you an example. Let's say that you invested $100,000, and let's just use an extreme example for mathematical ease. Let's say that it earned 100%. Well, obviously that would grow to $200,000. Let's say that the next year it earned negative 50%. That's because positive 100 plus negative 50 equals 50. And we're going to divide that by 2, which is 25, and we had a 2-year period of time. So again, you've put in your 100,000, it's grown to 200,000, and then it's gone back to 100,000 because of your negative 50% return. So again, your average mathematically correct example is 25%, but your actual rate of return is 0 because you started with 100,000 and at the end of 2 years, you ended with 100,000. So we're not taking into consideration inflation or fees or taxes on the 100% that you did earn. Of course, the fees would be charged on both years. We're not taking into consideration any of those outside elements. We're just pointing out, though through an extreme example, that average does not equal actual. Now, the typical financial planning industry's solution to this is something called Monte Carlo simulation, where rather than taking an average rate of return, they will, for example, take the last 10 years of the stock market actual returns, or maybe the last 20 years, and run your scenario through that 10 or 20 year period and all the ups and downs that it has. And while this is an improvement, it still has no basis in reality because it's using the rear view mirror of the past to try to project forward into the future. And while it could possibly maybe be somewhat accurate, do you really want to rely on possibly, maybe, and somewhat? So the money myth is that average equals actual, and I'm here to suggest that they have nothing to do with each other.